Welcome to On Top of the Covers, a weekly podcast by Orlove, dedicated to all of the creative visionaries, the entrepreneurs, the artists, makers, disruptors around the world. It is so much fun creating and connecting with all of you guys, especially as you guys have been tuning in in the early stages. We're featuring inspirational stories of people contributing to the culture of music, how they do it creatively, artistically, personally, and professionally. And really, we're bringing the people, the fans, the creators, everybody all together. And it's just fascinating to watch what's happening. I'm Matt Gottesman, your host and director of the Orlove brands. And really, as we say, music is one of the biggest connectors in the world. And it's a common bond. We're opening up conversations and we're merging these conversations of art, the contributors and their missions, because really we're in this new paradigm, this new era of creativity. And we want to show you all these unconventional ways and different paths that have led to various individual success. So we're going to dive in, and I've got an incredible guest today. I've been actually really waiting heavily for this episode. Grego O'Hallaron. He's an entrepreneur and innovator. Well, I'll go into his background here in a minute. But we're going to be talking about youth culture and the rise of trends and how they're reshaping the culture of music, right? Because youth culture has always been at the forefront, but from my personal take right now, and I know we're going to go on a tear with Grego on this, but what we're noticing is a more of a permissionless society than ever before because of tech and connectivity and the internet and new ways of doing things, and it's changing the paradigm of how we get art and expression to the masses, and how many less people in the middle a lot of times in doing so, but also how it's shaping different aspects of music culture, and very specifically certain genres, right? So Grego's background: director of UNUM Festival in Albania, director of Swallow Events. It's the world's first rapid testing solution for events for COVID, launching a new festival in South America in 2022. He's an Ibiza guru, lived and worked for 20 years and worked in events in the media space. He currently runs operations for Resistance Ibiza. It's the biggest party on the island. That is not an easy feat. 12 years at Circo Loco, DC 10 events, marketing, press, ticketing, everything, you name it. 10 years Cream at Amnesia, event manager and a promoter. He launched Resident Advisor in Ibiza. He was the head of operations for 3 years for them. Media-wise, he's a journalist for Resident Advisor, DJ Mag, Ibiza Voice. He's got thousands of articles and features. So I'm convinced this man doesn't sleep, and he'll probably prove me right. He was a guest speaker at IMS for 10 years, Rio Music Conference, has interviewed thousands of people in the industry. He's a ticketing guru. He set up and ran Ibiza Spotlight, which is the first online club tickets in the world that we think, and biggest seller in Ibiza. And event logistics, ran events for Sonar, Afterlife, Carl Cox, Sasha, Richie Houghton, Space, to name a few. Oh my God, your background is incredible. And NGA Sport Football Agency as well. He just launched a football agency with Andrea Polino from DC 10, and ex-head of football from SEG International, representing players at Juventus and amongst other teams. He's the head of communications and a football talent scout. So he, like everybody in our current paradigm, has a million hats. Grego, welcome to the show, man. I appreciate having you on.
How are you? Great to be here. That's some intro. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no, it's incredible, and it's always a hard question because we're more than one thing. And so it's like, oh, well, from 3 p.m. to about 5 p.m., I'm the director of this. And from, 9 p.m. till 1, I do this.
Well, so as you say, I think if ever there's been a time for people to diversify and have different hats and different side hustles, as you know about, this is the time. The pandemic has really crippled a lot of people in certain ways, and certainly in live music and events, it's done that. And that's behind a lot of the things you see there. So especially in terms of the football, but yeah, the COVID rapid testing wouldn't exist without a pandemic. So
yeah, you're such a well put point. In any crisis throughout history, more innovation has arisen than any other time, because of crises usually force people to have to rethink how they do things. So So very well put. Now, I mentioned to you before we started the show, we'll start off with a few rapid fire questions, but then I want to go in. I want you to explain your background as well too afterwards, and because these are incredible things, and you've got a lot of experience within the industry for a very long time within the genres, So we'll get there, but this is always my favorite part in the very beginning. And if you're ready, we're going to do the rapid fire questions.
Okay, cool. Go for it.
Okay, let's do it. So number one, if the world of music was going to be completely wiped out and you could only save 3 albums to listen to for the rest of your life, what would they be?
I hate these questions.
I know, right? I know.
I really hate them. I mean, I could pick anything. I'm from Liverpool, so I could pick the Beatles, obviously, Led Zeppelin, Alicia Keys, Bob Marley. But I'm gonna stick to dance music just because that's what I know. And I'm gonna pick 3 albums that I know the best. Probably I've played the most. I know the best in the 90s, and when I was first getting into electronic music, I listened to all the time. Homework by Daft Punk. Obviously, I think everyone knows that album. It's a masterpiece. Massive Attack had loads of great albums in the 90s, but I think Mezzanine was probably my favorite. And the other one, which I listened to nonstop in the 90s, when I was a teenager then, I'm not that old, was Leftism by Left Field. It was a real kind of moment in time for dance music albums, concept albums and artist albums. You still get them, but not quite in the same way. And it was because it was new. That's why no one had done it before. So
I remember that era because I was a teen in the 90s as well too. And you're right. And that mid to late 90s with EDM and dance music was incredible how fast it was emerging. So these are good albums. Okay, question number 2. Name an influential person, living or non, if you could interact with for one night, who would they be? Like, they can be anybody throughout history. I mean, you can go as far back as Leonardo da Vinci,
Yeah,
anybody.
I mean, I did think about Leonardo da Vinci. I thought about Julius Caesar. I'm sure there'd be plenty of questions I've got for those types of people. I'm a bit of a history buff as well, but I'm fascinated. I think one thing that really fascinates me is elite sports. The concept of elite performance, especially in sport compared to other fields, because it's all about performance, and there's no hype or subjectivity there. It's results, performance, and I think probably someone who epitomizes that more than anyone else is Michael Jordan. So I think, and having watched The Last Dance over the last year, and people talk about him being, I think someone said a quote about he was the best person at his job anywhere in the world, and that's true. It's just he was the best person doing any job at his job, and I think on that basis, I'd love to pick his brain about the philosophy behind sporting psychology as well, that type of thing.
I very well put too about with elite sport and elite performance. I was jotting down what you were saying about there's no hypersubjectivity. It's just the results, and in those results, you can see the accountability. And I think that's where with Michael Jordan, The Last Dance was incredible, and Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. It's a thought process and an accountability and a responsibility to their purpose. And they won't let anybody else get away with excuses if they're going to be on the same field as them in their level of play. It's fascinating.
It's the Mamba mentality. Yeah, it's just Kobe's Mamba mentality. And he was the epitome of this. He probably even more than Jordan. I heard the stories of him. He read the referee's rule book because he wanted to find out where the refs would stand, the umpire would stand, so he could get away with tactical fouls. And even though that's not necessarily in the spirit of the game, that just shows the level he was prepared to go to. Another interesting thing about these guys, and I know I'm going off a little bit, but is one thing with these guys in elite performance is that the top players, the top point scorers, the top shot makers, the top home run scorers in history and sports, you'll also find that those guys are the top shot misses in basketball. Kobe and Michael Jordan they've missed more shots than anyone else in the sport. Babe Ruth has got the most home runs in a season, and he's got the biggest strikeouts in a season in the same year. So it says a lot about how sports at that level works.
Well, and it's such a good point that you bring up, and I think if people they forget that, like, if you're a baseball player and you're hitting 300 and you're one of the top players in the world being paid hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're failing 70% of the time at bat. And then some people don't always, like, yeah, some people look at the money, but I'm like, you're like, oh, he's so successful. I'm like, he's failing 70% of the time. So it really is a perspective of, no, I got to get my 3 or 4 out of 10 every time I'm up to bat.
It's the same as, the best clubs in sport have won the most titles, have also lost the most finals. You can't have it just all one way. So.
So well put. We could. This will be episode number 2 when you come back on. Is elite performance, because I'm fascinated by elite performance and discipline, accountability, responsibility, radical transparency. I mean, it takes something.
It's the 1% as well. A lot of the times, it's not even the 1% anymore. It's the 0.01%. The change in diet, in music that they listen to, how they sleep, the pillow. You could take it to any level, and if that improves the match day performance or the game day performance, then it's worth it. So another really great point that you bring up, because a lot of people feel sometimes the pressure of I have to have it now, and I'm like, you don't understand. I was like, I work on my diet, I track my sleep every night, I know what kind of mattress I have, I have a nutritionist, I have a trainer. And that's just for the health side. I was like, I have to manage my finances with my accountant, I have to, I have and a tax person, and then I have these things over here, and then I got these businesses. And I think people don't just making it to be a professional athlete. You're already the obstacles and barriers you've overcome to get that far are incredible, and most people will never experience that and understand it. So to get in that top 1 or 2%, for them being the top 1% of that 1% is just blows my mind, really.
So true. Awesome. Okay, third question. In your opinion, what's the best music-focused film of all time for you? It could be a documentary, it could be history, it could be, a historical piece, it could be just a fun fiction, doesn't matter. But what would be the best music-focused film for you for all time?
For me, in terms of dance music culture, there's a film called Human Traffic, which is amazing. It's very, very much a British focused film, but it captures dance music culture in Britain in the 90s. But I think, having thought about the question, I think I'm going to have to pick one that's a true musical or music focused film, and it's Tommy by The Who, a band my parents loved. Absolutely, in terms of art and what they did with that film, it's just incredible. It's not really been done since, I don't think, in the same way. They finished the genre when they did that, and it's just still spectacular, really. And not just that, but the other artists and people they got involved. Eric Clapton and Elton John was in it. I think Jack Nicholson too. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, with that kind of lineup, it's a one-of-a-kind piece. It's always going to be that way. What's an important book, podcast, or audible that has helped you navigate your creativity and passion?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of health stuff, a lot of sports stuff, history stuff, music stuff. But I just generally, Gary Vee, I listen to almost every day, just because I agree with pretty much everything he says. I think that's important. And I know he's not for everyone, but his values and what he talks about, authenticity, being genuine, being nice to people, working hard, not beating yourself up when things don't go right, playing the long game, doing different things, it just resonates with me. And I learn something from him almost every day. And he cheers me up when I'm, it's not been so easy for everyone the last year when I've listened to him. It's, he reminds me that, come on, it's not been easy. Don't feel so bad. So definitely Gary Vee.
It's a great choice. I've been following him for several years, and I agree. He's radical accountability too. Like, look, it really is about your relationship with yourself and the choices you're making, and you can't make choices based on everybody else's opinions of you. You have to make your own choices on yourself. And then that idea of, I like he's, he did a post the other day talking about, like, of course I changed my mind. He's like, how could I not? Like, right? I thought it was brilliant, because people get stuck staying on something. And I learned this in the startup world in tech. Like, you can get stuck staying on something for a very, very long time. Well, now you're creating resistance. Like, really, if you learn something, if you learn new data and you need to pivot. That's life. That's all of life. So I really enjoyed that one.
Cool.
Okay. So we got through the rapid fire, but I really want people to get a sense of Grego, all the different levels, all the different things that you've gotten involved in. You can go as far back as you want, but help us, get an idea of the journey that got us up to today.
The 2 or 3 things that probably define me, or that I'm known as someone who absolutely loves Ibiza, the island in the Mediterranean. That's where I live. Although I'm not there currently, I'm from Liverpool and I'm currently in Liverpool. I suppose it does really start there for me. This whole journey started. I went on vacation to Ibiza in 99 when I was 17, and it pretty much changed my life. Since then, I met someone, I fell in love, I had kids, we emigrated to the island, and I've been there ever since. I've met people from all over the world. The festival I run in Albania is through people I met there. The festival I'm going to do in South America is through that. The sports agency is through that. Everything comes back to Ibiza. Back then it was I worked in summers there and then did my university degree. I did a degree in politics and economics. So that really did not come in useful, but there we go. And then very quickly, I think, the island absolutely enchanted me. It is a cliche, this magical island that, enraptures you and casts a spell on you. But I think if it's something does touch you, and it did touch me, and it was clear that it was more than the sum of its parts, and people have been trying to describe it and define it and explain it, what the magic is, and put all the parts together, and you do all that, and there's still something extra, something you just can't describe, and that to me is very appealing and alluring, and has kept me there for a long time, and made me want to bring my children up there and base my life there. It's a really small little island. It's a small little island in the middle of the Mediterranean that's a little bit backward in some ways. We haven't got big multinational shops, and the internet's slow sometimes, and all this kind of stuff. But actually, that means it's authentic. It's not mass consumerism. Although it's renowned for having a huge tourism and being the most lavish place, one of the most lavish places in Europe. I guess in terms of my journey, I got started promoting parties and running events, literally from the bottom up. So that was handing out flyers, putting up posters, working in the event, being a runner, being a barman, working in restaurants, working in the club, working on the door, running tickets, through to I always had a bit of a knack for words. So I started doing some journalism, talking about the things I loved, which were music and dance music. And at the time, writing for Resident Advisor and DJ Mag, there weren't that many people doing what I was doing. So again, a real key point here is that, I found something that I loved doing and I was knowledgeable about, and I cared about, and I focused on that. And that authenticity really has been the backbone of how I've kind of taken things forward, I think.
I mean, and you're like tied to everything there. I guess it makes sense for the time that you spent there. By the way, I feel I lived in Sevilla for like 8 months and I never went to Ibiza. I feel really bad about that. It was when I was 21, and I felt very much at home at Spain, and so I can only imagine even more so the character and the energy and everything that it draws to the island. And interestingly enough, I was listening to you, and it was funny how you're saying, like, it's funny that it's not really mass consumerism, yet isn't that interesting that it's also considered, you're absolutely correct, one of these more lavish places in Europe. So you've got this like peaceful energy vibe about it, and that's exactly what people love about it. And I always say peace is a luxury. So
it really is just a dichotomy completely there of, having really expensive nightclubs, really expensive drinks, hotels that go up to 1,000 a night in the peak season, and then 5 minutes down the road you can have this blue flag beach, which is crystal clear water, and there might not be anyone there, and there's 30 of them on a small island that in the winter transforms into something a lot more peaceful, a lot more simple. And for me as a parent as well, it's just there's no real rush hour. I don't watch the news. It's kind of, it's a bit oldie worldy in a way, which is nice in the modern world, actually, which is so full of in your face and nonstop, that you can have that kind of separation, if you like.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, a return to values. By removing the very things that tear us away from them, right?
Exactly. I mean, one of the things I wanted to mention was
Yeah,
there's a really famous book called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a really famous self-help book. Well,
right over there.
I wouldn't call it self-help. There's that one, and there's also the subtle art of not giving a fuck. Very much on the same theme. And the first chapter in those books talks about visualizing what it is it that's important to you,
Hmm.
and focusing on that. And for me, um, there are lots of things that are important to me, but not more so than my children and my family. So when I visualize my children and family and being a good dad to them and being a good father and providing for them and bringing them up in the right way, Ibiza completely matches that and fits that. There's no violent crime. There's, they speak the multilingual. It's cosmopolitan. It's international. There's a freedom there which is you just don't get in other places. There's certain things you used to take for granted there. Whether it's gender, sexuality, race. It's not to say that those things don't come up as an issue now and again there, but not in the same way as I would encounter in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you're saying. Those books were very changing, life changing for me. And the idea of thinking about what do you really want for yourself, and if we don't take a step back to actually define that for ourselves, it's being directed and navigated constantly by everything else around us externally. So you made a very good point. It's like, what really, really matters. And if you ask most people, sometimes you'll get the little bit just at first, the deer in headlights, like, what do you mean? And you're like, have you taken a step back to actually really think about what do you want? Like, what's that ideal
Well,
life?
it's scary to even think, Matt, that a lot of people perhaps don't even ask that question of themselves.
Oh,
It's they'll get to teenage years, and I mean I'm talking from my own experience, but I know it's very similar. Teenage years, and it's okay. Do I go to college, university? Well, I've got to get a job. I've got to get a house. I've got to save up for something and do this and have a family and get married. And I know, and then they reach 50 and think, "Whoa, hang on a minute." Well, my life's disappeared here. And maybe if they're lucky at that stage, they go down to Florida or they retire to Spain or France and get a place and they think, why didn't I do this 30 years ago? And I think, yeah, definitely one of the things that's changing is that the entrepreneurial spirit of the modern generation. That's not to say that that's right for everyone, but the entrepreneurial spirit, and Gary Vee, he couldn't be a bigger advocate of this than anyone else. Talks about, how that model and that paradigm has changed. And I think somewhere like Ibiza, because it is full of creative people, enables you to, as in my situation, I'm involved in a bit of everything, and you get to a point where you really feel like you can do everything. That's not to say that's feasible, but if there's a project which involves basic skills of communication and dealing with people, relationship management, these are things that are completely transferable. So
you're absolutely right. It's not taught. It's interesting because we've got skill sets and talents. We've got passion and interests. And the intersection of those two is powerful because you could be really, really good at several skill sets and you can apply it to music, fashion, art, technology, and so forth and so on. And the old paradigm was pick this one thing and be only this thing. This will be your identity for the rest of your life or until you have a midlife crisis and do something else. And it's just right.
Completely. I mean, it's interesting. I talk about these things, but I still, in my background, and still to this day, much like you still have this connection and love of something which transcends everything you do. And you could probably look back and say, well, I've built something here. There's still great meaning in building things, like some of the events I've been involved in Ibiza, Circle Loco, Cream, Amnesia, now Resistance. These didn't just happen overnight. They weren't a side hustle. This is something that I built up to be able to be involved in those roles, and actually went in at more ground level and then worked my way up, and then you develop in that way. I think so. There is definitely something to be said for time served and authenticity, but that it all runs in the same thing. But that doesn't mean that you can't then be the creative and have a side passion, or always wanting to change and kind of renew and revitalize what you're doing, even within that old brand or the same company that you've been working at. It doesn't just have to be the same. So
a perfect segue for this, what I wanted to talk to you about next, and the youth and what's
Okay.
happening, because I think it's an amazing, incredible time. And before the show, you mentioned the prophecy. We're living in this beautiful time of, I've been waiting for this time. I actually been preparing for at least the last decade or two. Finally now, no longer feeling like a fish out of water at 41. I'm like, it's our time. You know? But in terms of these new creation and connectivity and collaboration, and I believe, we're no longer in this, somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose outside of sports. I'm talking about like negotiations in business, and we'll do this and we'll take advantage of that, and this is how that'll like that paradigm is dying, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, and I'm going to stand by that. But I think it's and it's an amazing time because we're seeing this new paradigm of collaboration and connectivity, and lots of new business models and distribution from creator to consumer, and everything. But even in specific industries like music and fashion and art, and even within genres, I would love to get just your overall take about everything you're seeing, with the rising trends of the youth and things that you're really passionate about, that you're noticing.
Well, one of actually going back to my universities, something I always remember is that there was a social historian called Manuel Castells. He talked about what we're going through now is called an informational revolution. In the same way that the Industrial Revolution was based on industry, today is based on information. And back then, the Industrial Revolution, what it did was there was industry and factories, and what happened was, because of that, you needed houses close to each other, and that created communities. And it created women were emancipated in a way that created a cultural change. And now we're seeing the prophecy and the fruition of the first truly informational generation come through. The informational revolution has finally arrived, whereby the people who have only known this are now 20-something. They're now in power, and I think the barriers and the obstacles and the old paradigm, it is being ripped down slowly, and it will be slowly, but we're getting there. And I think you either adapt or you die. And I think especially if you're involved in something which is inherently youthful and inherently geared towards to 18 to 30-year-old, under 40-year-old, as music and electronic music is, you either become a dinosaur or you become the most radical person in the room, and you know all about NFTs before people do, and you're booking the most up and coming artist who nobody knows about, and you're taking chances and taking risks. I think just on a wider sense, certainly with this generation, there are certain things which you would never have seen before in terms of how the youth trends operate that transcend everything to do with not just music, but on a wider basis. There's a few things like sustainability and the environment and the climate. It's just not how it is anymore, that you forget about that and get on with what you're doing. It pervades all aspects of how people interact with brands and how they absorb culture, whether that's from using an environmentally friendly product or a green product, or giving something back, or actually being an activist in that way. And speaking of activism, I think that's also a huge thing, which is something that you've had. Of course, there have always been activists, but not on a whole scale basis as we see at the moment. Whether that's something to do with women's rights, equality, gender rights, political freedom of speech, whatever it may be, activism is a key part of how the youth of today really engage with culture. And we've seen so many examples, and don't ask me for one, but we've seen so many examples of Pepsi's a good one last year, of how when a brand really doesn't understand that and gets it wrong, it can backfire massively. So those are kind of general ones. I think when it comes to music, one of the, obviously, since we were younger, one of the things is that the technology, it's all about the technology and what the technology does. So whether that's a social media platform such as Clubhouse, which is enabling people, it just fascinates me. It truly fascinates me that you can, and I know you could always speak to someone on the other side of the world, but you can enter a room and engage with people anywhere on any level. And it really is a mind-blowing concept that I don't think can really be understood by a 40-year-old or 39-year-old brain like mine. You need to be of the informational revolution age to truly understand it and be connected in that way. Your brain's not wired in the same way. We could try, but there's that aspect. So the technology is definitely one. And in terms of music, you know, there's no old boys network either, like it used to be before, where there was a couple of vinyl records, or, you know, artists pass their favorite track between each other, or promoters only book their favorite artist or the big name. Now it's becoming much more of a meritocracy. So if a promoter's booking an event like me, and of course you want to book the big headline act, but if he's charging $50,000 and he doesn't sell the ticket, and you can pay $5,000 and someone else sells proportionately enough to make it viable, well, then you've got to play the numbers. It would be great to only do the most creative and artistic thing in each instance, but that's, you know, if you're running a business, it's not easy to do that. I think a lot of times you find a lot of young people, and I include myself in this idea of a lot of the projects I'm involved with, I don't make much money from, but they're passionate and creative projects for me, and I'll make my money elsewhere and get by in that way. Obviously, it'd be nice to have the ultimate, which is a completely artistic and fully creatively free project that earns you millions. That's not always how it is. So I think it's really important that, you know, if you're involved in this world, you make sure that you pay your bills and make ends meet, because if you're not doing that, you haven't got time for the side hustle and the art and the creativity. One of the things that I wanted to kind of just mention as well is that some of the sort of specific things I've noticed, and especially in terms of youth, is that actually I feel like genres have kind of melted away a little bit. You know, there was a period, especially in electronic music, where everything had to be fit into one pigeonhole. Everything had to be categorized in one way or another for ease of understanding. And then as more and more diversification came, and more strands and variants of genres and subgenres came along, the borders and the lines just melted away. And now you have an instance where you can have an artist who really transcends 7, 8, 9 genres. You don't really even know where to place them. You know, even in pop music terms, you know, dance music is mainstream now, but sometimes I find myself listening to something and I really find it difficult to place it, but it doesn't matter. That's not important. It's important is whether you like it or not, whether it appeals to you. And this is the other thing, which I think, especially in dance music, and I know this happens a lot, because it's such a new phenomenon, because, you know, this has only really been around since the 80s. So the people who invented it are still alive. You know, in rock music and pop music, they're still alive, but they kind of, you know, really reached the end, and it's been mainstream for so long. But with dance music, you know, the guys who were around in the late 80s and acid house era and Detroit and Chicago and whatever it may be, they're still generally, most of them, around. So there's this changing of the guard where if they don't stay relevant, you know, and a lot of them haven't, there's become almost like a bitterness to the youth that come up and take their place. And I understand it, and there's got to be a level of respect for those people, because we probably wouldn't be here without them. But at the same time, it's, you know, you don't get picked for the team if you're not scoring your basket or scoring your goal. You're on the bench. You're not playing. If you're not selling those tickets, if you're not making records, if you're not making people dance, you know, if you're not nice, if you're not easy to deal with, then for sure you're not going to get booked for a gig. And I think that's one thing with I certainly, for me, for projects that I'm involved with, I'd much rather have someone who's, you know, if we can get the project to be viable, I'd much rather have someone who's eager and keen and going to produce a good event and up for it and happy to be there, rather than a 50, 60-year-old DJ who's pissed off because they're not getting paid as much as they used to. And they played there 20 years ago and it was better then and whatever. No. It needs to go. There's
so much gold in everything you just said. I was taking some notes down, and just because to really honor a lot of what you're bringing up, the information age is definitely different than the industrial age, 100%. And it will replace its format, if you will. I like that, you know, when you're talking about a meritocracy, and when you're referring to like some of these artists, and like normally, I'm paid this, and if I can't do that, the interesting thing that we live in, when you were saying play to the numbers, is, yeah, but this amazing, insanely awesome, talented person over here who may not be worshipped in mainstream ish, like from like a media standpoint, or like, you know, your PR and your press and all that, but their community is backing them, and people know who they are and they love them, and they're like, yeah, I'll do it. Oh, 5,000-10,000, yeah, all right, let's do it. You know, there's everybody's own individual ecospheres are being created, and there's no permission for, well, if mainstream doesn't like me, I'm my own. I love myself. I like myself. I like me, myself, love and awareness, and the people I'm doing this for. And that's how we're coming up, and we're all going to do it together. So I think it's such a beautiful time where there's so much to choose from to make it work, right? To make the numbers work. You also brought up about, you know, being involved in multiple things, and how some things you may not make the money from, but it's such a strong passion, you'll make your money elsewhere. I think that's a very strong statement, and a good one, because I think sometimes people feel like they only have to be, well, this is just where I make money, and so I guess this is all I should be doing. I'm like, well, no, you can be doing whatever you want to do. One thing can just be one or several things can be your financier. It's the investor of, you know, your dreams, if you will. And then, of course, the ultimate, the intersection of, you know, your passion also being highly monetized for, you know, all the money, right? I mean, there's just so many different ways. So I love that you brought that up. And then when you were talking about the diversification and the borders melting away in the music and the experimentation, well, I wrote the word down, experimentation, but like where people doing multiple genres, I think what's so cool about that is that we're, again, industrial age, information age. Industrial age, let's compartmentalize. You're this title, you're this label, you're this identity, you're this category, you're all these things. This is how it's done. This is how it's always done. Don't disrupt that. And information age is very much like, I can do whatever I want to do and be whatever I want to be. And that's defined by who I am in this world and how I show up, and the choice is mine. And moving away from these labels and titles has allowed freedom of creativity and expression to expand far beyond, you know, what we've seen in most Renaissance periods, or if at all. So it's a very, very unique thing to witness, in my opinion, and be a part of, right? And then I love when you were bringing up about, you know, people who invented a couple of these genres with dance, with EDM and house and like Indian hip hop, and, you know, you're seeing, you know, they're still alive. But you brought up such a great point about we respect them, but you have the master, if you will, of the like the founding fathers also have to adapt, you know, because your constant mastery of your craft is really where I was going with that. And you see some artists that constantly keep reinventing, right? And really having fun with, oh, here's what's happening with it now. Let me try this. Let me experiment with that. Yeah. And if they don't, the relevancy won't be there.
I mean, it's so interesting on that point, because I mean, we could pick a load of different artists, you know, ranging from, you know, Madonna's the obvious pop icon who has constantly reinvented herself. And what's interesting with that is that she consistently appeals to a new generation and a new group of fans, and then the old fans become disenchanted with it and say, oh, you know, she's changed and blah, blah, blah. But that's the point. It's like she's not going to wither away and grow old, and because she's an artistic creative talent that wants to do that. You know, for every artist who we talked about is a founding father, you have people like Richie Hawtin is a good example in techno, who has appealed just as much to young kids as he's ever done, if not more nowadays. And I think that's not just in art. You have the ability to do that, and you know, you have ups and downs. In the end, you are only judged by your creativity. But I think it's important to understand in the modern world, you know, it can be very as much as the barriers are removed and they enable you to access. You know, you can create a label and put music out and use GarageBand and all the rest of it and create your own thing and whatever. With buttons on at home, it's much easier. But at the same time, you've got to be prepared to sink or swim. You've still got to do the graft. You still and as they said on The Sopranos, a hit is a hit. So you've either got it or you haven't got it. So you can do all those things. Today's you know, today where a lot of people are told that you know, you can do anything, and It's just not true. I can't be a 100-meter Olympic champion because I'm not fast enough. So yeah, I could run faster, but I can't ever be that. That's not me. I might never be able to sing a song and have a number one hit. So it's understanding what you want to do and putting it out there in a way that, I think in these times you've got the opportunity to do it, but I'm not sure. Yeah, the throwback of that is that you've got to be where you're swimming with sharks, and everyone's doing the same thing. So.
Gary Vee would be proud of you on that statement right there, right? When he talked about it, he's like, look, it's just not going to happen about me playing basketball. Yeah, You're absolutely right. We've never had more of the ability than ever before to go into something that we are extremely passionate about and skill set savvy in. It will require the most amount of work you could possibly ever imagine. You will never be able to escape the work, but we also have to be understanding of like, okay, yeah, I may not be an Olympic swimmer. I may not be, a basketball player. Oh, but I am this really awesome DJ, or I am this really great writer, and doubling down and tripling down on the discovery of your skill sets that can really leverage you in a multitude of ways. But it's true. Like you have to kind of look at like, hey, look, the NBA may not happen. But it's that story, isn't it? It's the journey. J.K. Rowling didn't write Harry Potter stories until she was in her 40s and she was on benefits, and there's a million examples. And a lot of actors didn't have their career break until they were in their late 50s. The story is unwritten. It doesn't matter how old you are. I think one of the things I've always, as I've grown older, I've always become aware of is that I never want to stop working. I don't want to ever retire, because I think it's just not for me. There's really good examples of look at your last president. It's he was in his 70s. The current one's 70. That's pretty old, really, in normal society terms. People retire probably long before that, actually, yet they're in this most high powerful position. And I think it's it's the brain exercise. I think as long as my brain's operating and running, and you'll keep going as long as you need to. Yeah, retirement has changed. I did a post about that. Like, what am I retiring from? Life? Retirement for me is when you end up at the end of the line. My soul is like, hey, I've done everything I'm here to do. Yeah. We're here to learn and grow consistently every day until we die. So I'm going to be creating until then, and learning and growing.
And I think it's look, we I mean, you mentioned NFTs before, and cryptocurrencies. It's kind of it's so hyped now, but in 20 years. It probably still won't even be where it's likely to be in 50 years, and then something else will come along, and it's this incessant conveyor belt and a relentless drive of youth and creativity that's always coming along, which the informational revolution has allowed. Before that couldn't happen, before the sexual revolution and the pill and emancipation of women and them having liberty over their sexual reproductive system, and making sure that enabled a more balanced society, and that's continually changing. Not that we're anywhere near finished on that, as you'll see anywhere in the world right now, not least in Western societies. The issues of gender inequality and race problems are just as strong as they've ever been, which is something I find difficult to actually deal with, because we make so many developments and advances, but then it still comes back often to these kind of tribal, carnal, the monkey mind, kind of reptilian mind, I think it's called, the reptilian brain, where we're just animals at the end of the day. So those things are still challenges, but the more you break down barriers, I really believe in this, the more you break down barriers and ignorance, it goes away, and those things, it's a domino effect. It just spirals. It becomes exponential what is possible. As soon as NFTs grow and develop exponentially, other things will develop as a result of that we don't even know about at the moment, that probably we'll be speaking about in 10 years. So
well, you and I will jump on another podcast in about a year and be like, hey, so that was a ride. You're absolutely right. It's interesting. I remember when I first got involved in cryptocurrency about 5 years ago, people were like, you're crazy. What is that? I'm like, don't worry about it. I mean, it's, because it's tech. And so I've been raised in tech. So I'm like, well, the use case is this. And I'm like, you're not following along, are you? They're like, no. I'm like, all right, well, wait till the use cases come out. And now the use cases are coming out, and how NFTs and Ethereum and how blockchain is actually being used, and And they're like, oh, it's this. And I'm like, look, we'll always be at the beginning because we'll always be evolving. But you're absolutely right. I mean, evolution will continue to keep taking things into areas where we just don't even know yet. And something that you were saying also I thought was really interesting was just the fact that like the ignorance is being broken down because, the revolution is being televised. After all, it really like, and everything else, like the old paradigm system that isn't long-term sustainable, isn't going to make it. It's just that now you can't escape the conversations and you can't escape the nuances and the little things. And it's like, hey, we're gonna have to deal with it.
I mean, there's certain things, that just, even in the space of a few years, just, you can't believe that they happened. I was reading about Game of Thrones, and they were talking about some of the pressure the female actors were put under to perform in nude scenes and different aspects of the sex scenes and stuff. And they openly said, look, that wouldn't have happened if this was being filmed now. So even in a short space of time, things have really developed and changed. And I think, it's, the rules of the game are constantly changing, and you just have to try and keep up.
Right. Absolutely. How do you, with all the changes that are happening, how do you feel like what's happening in currently in your space, like with events and with parties and with music? Okay, where we are today is not going to be where we're heading tomorrow, but how do you feel like it's evolving for where we're heading, and how are you dealing with the changes that have happened so quickly in just the last year?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's suffice to say, pretty much all of my income disappeared overnight, with COVID. And I think I can speak for most people who were involved in events. Certainly in Ibiza, you had the double whammy of, it was a double hit of the music scene there, but also the tourism that the island has, because travel was obviously impossible. So overnight, the whole, there was the whole island was kind of locked down, and that was it. There was obviously people there going to school and operating in that way, but effectively so much of the island is based on tourism and that scene that it's really been difficult. And one of the difficult things is it's not just easy to say, all right, well, we're going to come out of this in 6 months or 12 months. One thing that's really been on my mind a lot is that what you got to understand is with dance music culture is that this is inherently a really focused on a youth culture. So you first engage with this culture when you're 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, something like that. You don't really engage with it when you're 30 or 40, just doesn't happen. If you're 16 or 17 or 18 and you can't go to a club, and you haven't been able to go to a club for a year, then you're just going to do something else. You're going to get into gaming, get into walking, get into cooking, get into playing chess. And then that moment passes. It's like trying to get the lunar module back in through the atmosphere. You've got to get it at the right angle. If you miss it, they're gone forever. It's this instance where there will be people now who never go to Ibiza or never go to a club or a festival, because at the age when they were 18 and they finished their school or whatever, they weren't able to go. There'll be people who never travel because at the age when they could really do it and wanted to, the world was locked down and you couldn't travel. And actually now they're a little bit worried about it and they don't want to. And that they'll grow up not traveling, which is unbelievably sad. The knock-on effect is that if they have younger brothers or sisters or friends who are a bit younger, they'll look at them and think, well, my brother's doing that, I'll do what he does. Or my sister's doing that, I'll do what they do. They won't follow them in the same way that cultures develop. So that's the biggest threat to dance music culture at the minute, that we really, it's like being starved of oxygen. Our oxygen is to have social events and festivals and clubs, and you could say the same for other genres of music even. But I know a lot of people who are into classical music, but they never go and see it live. They sit at home and listen to it. So it's not a culture in the same way that you would if you attend a festival or a club is. I think to amplify that, I mean it's really that we've been starved of oxygen, and if you're starved of oxygen long enough, parts of the brain will die. And that's the worrying part. I think the good thing is that we look like we're at least over the worst of it. The vaccinations mean that we're hopefully getting to a point where there's only one way now, which is releasing and reducing of restrictions. Certainly one of the things I've been trying to do through my company, Swallow Events, is to develop a way that, solution for rapid testing for events that can enable events to take place. It's essentially a health passport with testing. It's everything that they talk about constantly. And if only we had this, well, we got it. It's just that we're so far ahead of the law at the minute that they need to catch up with us. One of the other things as well that's really important, I think, in terms of the future of dance music and the landscape is that, to a certain degree, someone said this to me yesterday, the scene was it was almost exhausted before the pandemic. It was very fatigued in terms of, it was very, very strongly brand led. And a lot of those events were almost identical in lineup. It's one big marquee. You know we're special. It could be Miami or New York or London. Yeah, it's great, the event, but it's not exploring your horizons or widening your horizons, or going to Albania where my festival is, and exploring the culture there, or being part of something that's an embryonic stage, which my festival is, where there's no sound restrictions, no time restrictions. So in terms of what the future holds, I really think one of the things that might happen is that you'll find smaller festivals, boutique festivals, destination events. People will, rather than pay $150 to go down the road and stand in a marquee with 50,000 people, they'd rather pay $250 to go to Mexico and be with 1,000 people and have that experience. Because the fallout from the pandemic as well, I think, for those people who were into this beforehand, certainly everyone I speak to, we're just all so desperate to get back to our lives before, and we won't take it for granted, not at the start, at least. I don't know as things develop, because I know how things go, but I think, in terms of cultural experiences and destination events, I can't wait to book tickets to go and see all the artists that are in the 60s and 70s that I should have seen for the last 20 years. I think there will be a lot of that when things kick back, and there'll be a huge bounce back. But certainly I think whilst there'll be a honeymoon period, I do think people will be as well. I think that the pandemic has changed some social habits. You will find people, they'll think, well, do I want to be with 100,000 other people? Yeah, that's great, but 2,000 is fine for me. I'd rather just have 2,000. Then I can park nearer, then I can stay nearer, then it's a little bit cheaper. I think as well, one of the things for the scene is very much about, we talked about how artists need to renew and revitalize their, renovate what they're doing and renew what they're doing, and revitalize their brand and their identity. I think one of the things is actually what you'll find is that kind of non-artist based events could be popular. A really popular one is Orlove, obviously. Orlove's huge, probably the biggest dance music brand in the world at the minute. And, no one goes, well, some people do, but nobody really goes for the DJ. They go for the show. That's what it's all about. It's an amazing concept. I know the guys well from Barcelona since they started it, and yeah, they're inspirational, and they've got a history of 150 years of running events as well. So they're a classic example of how things have developed. But people go there for the show and the event. It's a concept-based thing, and I think that could be something you see a lot more of. Smaller events in special locations. And certainly from my point of view, I have a festival in Albania now. Ibiza's doing something in South America. I'm on a bit of a mission to take dance music to remote areas of the world. I'm speaking to someone about doing something in West Africa as well, which I'm really excited about. And the reason why is that I just the idea that I could bring a piece of what I know has made me so happy and enrich my life, to take it to somewhere where you should never take it and it would make no sense to do it. That's what being a promoter in the dance music world is all about, taking those risks and having a go. Why not?
I think you bring up some incredible points with understanding the audience and the future and preparing for where you're heading. I agree. I think that there's obviously well, okay, let me back up. The part where you were saying about, it was getting a little fatigued, and so a change was inevitable regardless. And sometimes, what I've learned in just own personal transformation is either we make the choice to transform and start moving forward or we'll be given blessed the opportunity to do so. Sometimes not at what we think feels so warm and fuzzy. And so I think it's fascinating, you taking a look at it and go, okay, you know what? Here's what the industry was doing and here's where it was heading. It needed a change. And maybe it really is more about the intimacy. Well, isn't it ironic that that's where we're heading anyways? Because as people started kind of staying back home now, they do want to emerge, but they are rethinking about how they got comfortable with their, smaller circles and friends and family. It became a whole, I mean, I know there's other scenarios where it wasn't, but I'm saying in a lot of cases, though, with a lot of people, it was like, I like more intimate gatherings. This feels right. So I think the idea of like taking something that, is now part of their psychology and saying, hey, you know what, why don't we make more destination driven experiences that are intimate, because that is something that would still also make you feel very much, in your direction of where the consumer is heading already, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's this thing of I think, certainly George Carlin's a real hero of mine.
Yes,
I think, he's one of the other people. If I could spend the night with someone, he's another person. And he talks about this dumbing down and people being spoon fed. And to a certain degree, that's just how entertainment works. Look, come on, we're all victims of Netflix and everything else. I'm no different. But at the same time, that means that when you're able to not just have to go to that big festival that everyone else is going to and everyone's bought tickets for, and it's, you've got no choice how you experience it. It's your funnel down a path, which is well done, don't get me wrong, but and these guys are peers of mine, and people I admire and respect massively. But you can't always have that all the time, because then it really dilutes it and it becomes meaningless. So that the opposite of that spoon-fed kind of experience is the DIY. Let's see what happens. Where are we going? I don't know. Well, I've never been there before. Let's take a risk kind of experience. And and actually, certainly for a country like Albania to do a festival there is no scene there in Albania. So there's almost no festivals. We're practically the first one doing something there. So and again, the story of how I've ended up there doing this is just part of the magic of it, and one of the key things, and this is always something I said about Ibiza. Look, Ibiza is not for everyone. The clubs are expensive, but I always say, look, if you want to go and see opera, you go to La Scala in Milan. You're not paying $50 for a ticket. You're paying $500 for a ticket, because it's the best. If you want to go and see the best sports event, you go to the gardens. You're paying the top dollar, because it's the peak of that sport. You can go and watch college basketball and it's cheaper, or you don't pay at all. It's the same for Ibiza. You were talking about the best clubs in the best environment, so you pay that little bit more. But I think that's why, again, just to finish on Ibiza from my point of view, that's why Ibiza really has that magic where, you can have that kind of large experience. And, on one night, a lot of people as well, what I like about Ibiza is you can go there as a Swedish house mafia or chain smokers or deadmau5, and I've seen it happen to them all, and they'd sell out a gig anywhere else in the world. But when they come to Ibiza, it doesn't quite work like that, because you've got one of those other acts down the road, or Tiesto down the road. So on one night, within 5 miles, you've got all those acts. So it's the Premier League, it's the Super Bowl, World Series, all rolled into one there. And I think that's why it's kind of a leveler as well. Actually, even though it's the top end, you still have to earn your stripes. You still have to save your time. But then when you've had that experience there's still a bit of magic out there. You can still go and see a sunset and a sunrise and beautiful beach and get away from it and have that cultural experience we're talking about.
I mean, it was well put. And the fact that you said it's a leveler, in everything you have to evolve, in everything, in anything. And so, the part where you're bringing up earlier about, I mean, we can never get too comfortable. It'll work for a while, of course. But I think one of the greatest things I learned from a mentor a long time ago was just that, like, stay grounded and stay close to the work, stay close to the evolution of it, because, if you ever get too comfortable, you miss the adaptation, you miss the evolution of what it's becoming, of where it's heading, or the drastic change up, just like that. When it happens, you're like, wait, what? Yeah. I was prepared for that, though, because I was already thinking about more intimate gatherings.
Exactly.
And, oh, go ahead.
Well, listen, promoters are, if there was one type of species that were going to be okay throughout this pandemic, it would be dance music promoters, because we're just entrepreneurs at heart. So we'll find a way. If there's a party to be had and put on and made to happen, we'll find a way. And I've managed to do it in Albania, and I know a lot of people have managed to do it in and out of different lockdowns and levels of lockdown, and bottle service table bubbles, literally plastic bubbles and stuff. And yeah, it's just testament to people's ability to deal with adversity, really. Yeah, it's I think I've got a bit more of a smile on my face than I did this time 6 months or a year ago, because, you know, hopefully we are over the worst of it, but certainly that's something I'll look back on and say, look, we're better for it.
Promoters are like the quintessential entrepreneur.
Yeah, true.
They're resourceful.
You don't know when to say no. That's just
I mean, resourceful, connected, relationships, like the ability to make things happen, like in a split second. You know, they'll manage the money, they'll manage the talent. I mean, like they're kind of the central hub a lot of times of making everything come together. So you're kind of the cog in the wheel that has to actually happen. So no matter what, I feel like they're the quintessential entrepreneur, and there's like a solution to every problem.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You'll figure it out.
True.
You know? This is incredible. Where like what do you have coming up next? I know you're planning something for 2022, and I want to.
Yeah, so the big thing for me is we have UNUM Festival in June.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be, as far as we know, the first fully fledged rapid testing event in the world. So there's not going to be social distancing, no masks. We've got approval from the government to do this. We're working with Swallow Events, who are going to provide the rapid testing and do this in a secure way to ensure that everyone who's there it's going to be safer in the festival than anywhere else in the world, basically, at that time, because everyone's going to have been tested. It's going to be super secure, using a digital app with blockchain and pre-event verification and identification, the whole lot. And we've got 60 artists from around the world. And this is like the first big festival back, really. Not even the first big one, the first one of any type in the music world, really, in the start of June. And it's all because we've been able to make this happen with the Albanian government. And luckily for me, I've been in both camps, the festival and the rapid testing, and I've kind of been able to make it all merge together. I think if I wasn't involved on both sides, it might not ever have happened, which is bizarre, but that's what's been needed, that perfect storm of a scenario. So that's the key thing for me. Next year I really want Ibiza to come back as soon as it can and be back to its old self, because that's where my heart is. And it's at the minute it's suffering a little bit, the island. So but it's suffered long before I was there, and it'll suffer again. But I think Ibiza is a TBC at the moment, but certainly things are in motion for it to be back soon.
Yeah, I mean, and you're busy. I mean, you innovated. You came up with with Swallow Events, and I mean, and by the way, that's incredible with the event in Albania, because I mean, when you're saying like or the first of any of them back, I mean, that's I like the ability to just say, you know what, we're going to figure it out. We're just going to do it, and we'll be first if we have to. Let's do it. You know,
the thing is, the actual what's interesting, Matt, with this one is that the actual solution itself, it's not that it's a simple solution. It's just one more logistical problem that we have to overcome, and we overcame it very quickly, and we had the solution. The problem is that the reason why no one else is doing this is that we're so far ahead, and Albania's gone with us. Probably because they're a little bit loose as well, actually. You know, they said, all right, well, look, we want festivals to happen. You're the first of your type, and we want to show that we can do this and play with the big boys. So actually, they've gone for the ride with us a little bit, which means that we've been able to make this happen. In 6 months or a year's time, this could be a longer term thing where eventually big governments, you know, are going to have to. I mean, in New York, I know they've done the same thing where small events can happen now with testing, but they're still not able or happy or satisfied to be able to say, do you know what, this solution means it's safe. Go back to normal, and that's going to be a process where you have to educate these people. I mean, this doesn't happen overnight.
True, but you know, the innovators are always first, and there's always like, you know, saying, you know, thank God Albania was was really willing to go along with this, and there's always that though. There's always the, you know what, we got to keep moving, let's do it, and so rewards and kudos go to you. And yeah, no, it's never easy. It's actually a first mover is usually overwhelming. There's the flip side that I think the public doesn't always see, is all the behind the scenes, which has always been what my brands have kind of always said, is like, hey, here's the behind the scenes that you don't see. And then it's important to celebrate that and honor that and respect that, because there's so much that goes into being a first mover or trying something that isn't globally adapted or even understood by an audience in you know, a lot of different you know, startups and technologies and things. I'm not even just, I'm saying with yours, I'm just saying in general, you know, when the masses don't always, understand it, right? And you're like, you know what, I'll be first, let me go, I'll do it, let's see what happens. You always get the masses go, I like that idea, you let me know how it goes in a couple of years, I'll be back. You know? Yeah. So I give you massive credit. Where can everybody find out about you online and connect with you?
Yeah, so probably on Instagram's best, Grego Ibiza. Sorry, I had to have the Ibiza handle, but find me there. UNUMFestival.com as well. That'd be great. And yeah, I just want to thank you, Matt, so much for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I hope we can do this again another time soon.
Absolutely. We'll connect offline here in a second, but absolutely appreciate you coming on the show and talking about just your experiences. And also, I mean, we're wanting to support you just the same. I mean, this is a massive undertaking that you're doing. So anyway, we can provide that value and let everybody know what's going on, and we will, because we're really good at at that online too. So, you know, we're just as equally grateful having you on, man. And you and I will continue to connect. But everybody that's listening, please go check out Grego Festival. He and I, we just connected on Insta. You guys can also go to my Insta at Matt Gottesman. You'll find just go look up, you know, who I follow, just type in Grego and you'll find him. But please go follow him, support what he's trying to do, and you know, and connect with him. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to him. I'm automatically making your DMs blow up, but
no, please go for it.
Yeah, you know, because I always say it's, you know, everything that we, you know, do is always community driven, and everybody that comes on the show, they're community driven as well too. They're trying to constantly push the boundaries of what's possible in especially in the culture of music. So want to thank Grego O'Hallaron, Grego, for coming on the show. Thank you guys all for tuning in. It really means a lot to us, you know, for On Top of the Covers, and just for the movement, and really, as we say, the contribution of music culture, because we don't play with inside of industry. We like to expand way beyond the conversation, way beyond, because there's so many facets of people contributing to the culture of music worldwide in a multitude of different ways, especially in a creatively expansive time that we're living through. Also, please give us feedback. Being a part of this journey, you can give us a 5-star written review on Apple. It expands our show. You can follow on all major platforms at We Are Orlove. Again, myself at Matt Gottesman. Be sure to subscribe to the Orlove YouTube channel for weekly launches of our web series. You'll also get, you know, with Under the Covers, but you'll also get snippets in the full episodes of On Top of the Covers there as well. We absolutely love and appreciate each and every one of you guys, and we're out.